For a very long time, this story was never meant to be told. Not because it was false. Not because it was exaggerated. But because it was dangerous. Some truths are not destroyed. They are buried. Buried beneath silence. Buried beneath influence. Buried beneath fear. What you are about to hear was hidden for decades. Not lost. Not forgotten. Silenced. Because every time this story came close to the surface, something happened. Files disappeared. Voices went quiet. And people who knew the truth suddenly remembered nothing. At the center of all of this was a single locked room. And inside that room was a girl the world chose not to see. The town where this happened was small. The kind of town where nothing ever changed. People woke up at the same time every morning. Shops opened on schedule. Faces were familiar. Everyone knew everyone. And everyone knew what not to talk about. There was an unspoken rule, passed quietly from one generation to the next: do not ask questions that make powerful people uncomfortable. At the edge of the town stood a house. It was old, gray, lifeless. No flowers. No decorations. No sound of children. Its windows were always closed. Even in summer. Even during the day. Lights inside the house rarely changed. Always dim. Always controlled. People notice these things. But noticing and speaking are very different acts. The family who lived in that house was respected. Not loved. Respected. They donated to local events. They attended ceremonies. They were seen with officials. They had influence. And in towns like this, influence is protection. No one questioned them. No one challenged them. And anyone who tried learned very quickly to stop trying. Inside the house, rules were strict. Doors stayed locked. Voices stayed low. But one rule mattered more than all the others. No one was allowed near the back room. Not servants. Not guests. Not family members. And never, under any circumstance, ask what was inside. The back room was small. Bare walls. Cold floor. A single, narrow window. Placed too high to see through. Light entered that room for less than an hour each day. There was no clock. No calendar. No mirror. Nothing to measure time. Nothing to confirm existence. Only walls. And inside that room, a child was growing up. Without knowing what childhood was. She was placed there when she was very young. So young that she never learned what freedom felt like. She learned silence before language, fear before comfort, and obedience before understanding. She did not know her birthday. She did not know her age. Days blurred into nights. Weeks disappeared into nothing. Food arrived once a day. Always at the same time. Placed quietly. Just inside the door. No words were spoken. No eye contact was allowed. Over time, she stopped expecting conversation. She began speaking to the walls. To shadows. To the faint lines of light that moved slowly across the floor. She talked to silence. Because silence was the only thing that stayed with her. Slowly, even her own name began to feel unfamiliar. At night, the house made sounds. Soft sounds. Crying. Scraping. Sometimes muffled screams. The neighbors heard them. They paused. They listened. And then they told themselves lies. It's an old house. It's animals. It's nothing. Deep down, they knew better. But in that town, knowing the truth was dangerous. Silence was safer. There were no official records of her. No birth certificate. No school enrollment. No medical history. If you searched government archives, you would find nothing. Officially, she did not exist. Someone had been very careful. Careful enough to remove every trace of her life. And behind that locked door, time did not move forward. It stood still. Waiting. Because this was only the beginning. What happened next was far darker. Silence did not just surround the room. It shaped it. Inside those four walls, time had no direction. Morning and night felt the same. There was no sound of traffic. No voices drifting through open windows. No signal that the world outside was moving forward. For her, the world had stopped. And slowly, so did she. As the years passed, her mind began to change. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Her thoughts no longer followed a clear line. Memories blended together. Dreams felt more real than waking moments. Sometimes she imagined voices. Sometimes she imagined hands reaching through the walls. She learned to sit still for hours. To move only when necessary. Movement attracted attention. And attention often led to pain. There were moments when the door opened longer than usual. Not to speak. Not to comfort. Only to remind her that someone was watching. Eyes never met hers. She was not treated like a child. She was not treated like a person. She was treated like a problem that needed to stay hidden. Her body grew. But her understanding of the world did not. She did not know what seasons were. She did not know what years meant. She measured time by hunger and exhaustion. Some days, food arrived late. Those were the worst days. Hunger sharpened fear. Fear erased thought. She learned that silence did not mean safety. It only meant survival. The family avoided the back room. Not out of guilt. Out of fear. They did not speak of her. They did not acknowledge her presence. To them, the room was a sealed mistake. Something that could not be undone. Without consequences. They convinced themselves that as long as the door remained closed, nothing inside could harm them. They were wrong. At night, the sounds became louder. Not every night, but often enough to disturb sleep. Soft crying. Scratching against the walls. Low, broken whispers. Neighbors noticed patterns. The sounds came from the same side of the house. Always after midnight. Always when everything else was still. Some people discussed it quietly. Others refused to listen. In that town, curiosity carried a price. One neighbor tried to ask questions. He mentioned the sounds to a local official. The official listened politely. Nodded. And the next day, the neighbor received a visit. No threats were made. No warnings spoken. but the message was clear. Do not speak again. He never did. Inside the room, the girl began to lose language. Words felt heavy. Unnecessary. Silence was easier. Her voice became unfamiliar to her own ears. When she spoke, it sounded wrong. She stopped trying. Thoughts turned inward. She began replaying memories that might not have been real. Was there once a window she could see through? Had someone ever spoken her name? She could not be sure. The room smelled of damp stone, of old air. She learned every crack in the wall, every shadow. She marked the passing of time by changes in light. But even that became unreliable. Some days, the light did not come at all. Those were the days she believed she had disappeared completely. The family told themselves that everything was under control. They told themselves that the room was necessary, that the world outside could never know. They believed they were protecting something. Their reputation, their power, their version of the truth. Years passed. Quietly, relentlessly. The girl's body weakened. Her movements slowed. Standing made her dizzy. Light hurt her eyes. She feared open space, without ever having seen it. The room had become her entire reality. And yet, despite everything, she survived. Not because she was strong, but because the human mind will endure almost anything when it has no choice. Outside the house, time moved on. Governments changed. Officials retired. Records were reorganized. And in that process, certain documents vanished. Files connected to the house were misplaced. Reports went missing. Anyone searching for the truth would find nothing. The erasure was almost perfect. Almost. Because secrets have weight. And the longer they are hidden, the heavier they become. Pressure builds. And eventually, something cracks. That crack came from inside the house. From a place no one expected. And it would expose everything. Because after 25 years of silence, one mistake changed everything. The plantation did not sleep that night. It never truly did. But this night was different. The air felt heavy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Cicadas stopped singing too suddenly, as if warned. Even the candles inside the manor burned low, their flames trembling though no wind passed through the halls. Eleanor Whitmore sat alone in her room, fingers clenched around the edge of her wooden desk. She had not eaten. She had not prayed. She had not cried. She was listening. Because someone was walking in the walls. Slow footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. She knew those steps. Everyone on the plantation did. Isaac. The man no one spoke about. Isaac had been brought to the Whitmore plantation 13 years earlier. No chains. No auction block. No shouting overseer, just a sealed carriage, and a contract her father never allowed anyone to read. Isaac was listed as property. But he was never treated like one. He was given a private cabin, far from the others. He was never whipped. He never worked the fields. And he was allowed inside the manor places. Even some white servants were forbidden to enter. People noticed. People whispered. But no one asked questions. Because when people did, they disappeared. Not immediately. They simply left the plantation one day. No goodbyes. No wages collected. No names spoken again. And so, silence became law. The first time Eleanor saw him. Eleanor was 16. She had dropped a book in the East Corridor, the forbidden corridor where portraits of dead Whitmores watched with painted eyes. When she bent to pick it up, she felt it. A presence. Not threatening. Not warm. Aware. She turned. Isaac stood at the far end of the hall, candlelight cutting sharp lines across his face. He did not bow. He did not avert his eyes. He simply looked at her. And for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt something terrifying. She was being seen. Not as a daughter. Not as property. Not as a future wife. But as a truth. She ran. That night, she dreamed of locked doors opening on their own. What her father knew. Edmund Whitmore had built his empire on secrets. Sugar. Land. Blood. But Isaac was his greatest secret. Because Isaac was not bought. He was inherited. Passed down like a curse from Edmund's father, and his father before him. Each generation signed the same contract. Each generation tried and failed to destroy it. The document said only this: the bearer is bound to the house. The house is bound to the bearer. Neither may exist without consequence. Edmund hated Isaac. Not because Isaac was enslaved. But because Isaac knew. The night of the argument. It began with shouting. Eleanor heard it from her room. Her father's voice cracked with fear. Isaac's voice quiet, controlled, almost gentle. Then something shattered. Glass. Then silence. Minutes passed. Then Eleanor heard her father scream. Not in anger. In understanding. She never heard that scream again. Morning without a master. The sun rose. The plantation stood still. No bell rang. No orders were shouted. Servants gathered in whispers. By noon, the truth spread like wildfire: Edmund Whitmore was dead. No wounds. No blood. No struggle. His eyes were open. And his mouth was twisted in terror as if he had seen something that erased him from the inside. The doctor ruled it a sudden collapse. Everyone else knew better. Isaac was nowhere to be found. The letter left behind. Eleanor received it at dusk. A single page. Her father's handwriting. Shaking. If you are reading this, then I am already gone. You must never free him. You must never bind him further. And whatever he asks of you, you must decide whether you want to survive, or rule. The letter ended there. No signature. Just a dark stain where ink or blood had soaked through. Isaac returns. That night, Eleanor stood in the study. Alone. The fireplace was cold. The door opened without a sound. Isaac stepped inside. No chains. No hat. No submission. He knelt. Not because he had to. But because he chose to. Miss Whitmore, he said softly, your father is at rest. Her voice shook. Did you kill him? Isaac looked up. No, he said. I reminded him. The choice. Isaac rose slowly. The house requires a keeper, he said. And the keeper requires consent. Eleanor felt the walls listening again. What happens if I say no? She asked. Isaac smiled faintly. Then the house will choose for you. And if I say yes, then you will never be powerless again. She understood then. This plantation was not held together by chains. It was held together by fear and agreement. And she was standing at the center of it. The contract. The document was older than the house. Written in ink that shimmered strangely in candlelight. No mention of slavery. No mention of ownership. Only exchange. Protection, for silence. Longevity, for obedience. Control, for inheritance. Eleanor's hand hovered over the quill. Her entire life had been decided by men who believed they owned everything. This was the first decision that was truly hers. She signed. The house exhaled. What the plantation became. Under Eleanor Whitmore, things changed. Quietly. No chains were broken publicly. No revolutions declared. But punishments stopped. Families were kept together. The sick were treated. People noticed. The plantation grew richer. Safer. Stronger. And Isaac remained. Always watching. Always guiding. Never owning. Never owned. Years later, Eleanor would write in her private journal, "They believe Isaac was the slave. They were wrong. He was the memory. And memory is the most powerful master of all." Eleanor Whitmore had changed. Not visibly. Not immediately. But inside, something had shifted. The locked room, the years of silence, the revelations about Isaac and her father. They had all left marks. Marks no one could see. Marks that would guide her choices forever. She walked the halls of the manor at night. The floorboards creaked under her bare feet. Candles flickered at the corners of rooms. Shadows stretched and moved as though alive. She could feel the house watching her. Feeling her. Judging her. And she liked it. The girl becomes a leader. For years, she had been passive. Obedient. Invisible. But now she realized, power was not given. It was taken. It was understood. It was enforced. The servants had been cautious around her before, but now they hesitated differently. Respect. Not fear. Not yet. But it was growing. Isaac remained in the background. Always observing. Always controlling. Always patient. Eleanor studied him. And she learned. He did not command through orders. He commanded through presence. Through silence. Through choices. The first test. The first challenge came unexpectedly. One of the new laborers, a man named Thomas, arrived with questions. He asked about the house, the family, the locked room. Too loudly. Too boldly. Eleanor watched from the staircase. Isaac stepped forward, calm. His eyes cold, deliberate. "You should not ask," he said softly. But the man did not stop. Eleanor intervened. Her voice was calm. Measured. Impossible to ignore. "Leave. Now," she said. Thomas hesitated. Then nodded. And left. For the first time in her life, Eleanor felt control. Not the fleeting kind her father had held. Not the kind demanded through fear. But true power. The house reacts. The house responded immediately. The air shifted. The shadows grew longer. The portrait seemed to follow her with sharper eyes. Even Isaac remained still, watching carefully, as though the walls themselves had acknowledged the change. Eleanor understood then, the house did not just hold the family. It tested them. It chose them. It bound them. And she had passed. The first encounter with the past. The locked room called to her that night. She had avoided it, ignored it, pretended it did not exist. But the weight of 25 years pressed down. She approached the door. Her hand hovered over the handle. Inside, she saw shadows of her childhood. Faded light on the walls. The faint outlines of scratches she had made when she was small. Marks no one remembered. Marks only she could understand. And there he was. Not Isaac. Not her father. Himself, the memory of everything she had endured. She realized then, the room had not been a prison. It had been a teacher. The choice. Isaac entered silently. "You know why you are here," he said. "Do you accept what must be done?" Eleanor did not answer immediately. She did not speak. She walked inside the room, closed the door behind her, and stood in the shadows. Everything she had feared, everything she had suffered, converged into one clear thought: she would not be powerless again. The decision was hers. And for the first time in decades, she smiled. The plan unfolds. The following days were a lesson in quiet dominance. Eleanor began issuing instructions. Simple ones at first. Then more complex. The servants followed. The house seemed to acknowledge her authority. Isaac no longer led, he guided. He tested her subtly, like a teacher testing a student. But Eleanor never faltered. She moved through the manor with confidence. The locked corridors, the whispered warnings, the secrets of her father's power, they were now hers to control. Even the distant neighbors felt the change. The aura of the house shifted. Even whispers could not penetrate the strength she now exuded. The first night alone. That night, she stood at the balcony. Wind swept across the plantation. The sky was heavy with clouds. She could hear distant thunder. Not loud. Not violent. But it reminded her, some things were bigger than her. Some forces were eternal. Yet she was ready. She would not be the frightened child again. The girl who whispered to shadows, the girl who obeyed. She was Eleanor Whitmore. Master, matriarch, survivor. And she would never let the house or anyone forget it. The promise. Isaac spoke softly from behind. "You have done well." Eleanor did not respond immediately. She simply looked at the dark horizon. The weight of 25 years still lingered. But she had converted it into power. "You will guide them all," Isaac said. "And they will listen." Eleanor turned to him. Her eyes steady, unwavering. "I will do more than guide," she said. "I will decide." The house seemed to sigh in approval. The shadow of the past remained. The memory of silence lingered. But the darkness was no longer stronger than she. She had risen. She had claimed her place. And nothing, not walls, not shadows, not even time itself, would ever make her small again. The Whitmore plantation had changed. Not on the surface. Not in plain sight. But beneath the layers of polished wood and trimmed hedges, something was stirring. Rumors. Questions. Small, careful glances from outsiders who were beginning to notice that the estate's rhythm no longer followed its old patterns. For decades, the house had ruled by fear and silence. The family had obeyed its unspoken rules. The servants had obeyed theirs. The surrounding town had obeyed both. Now, Eleanor Whitmore's presence altered everything. The first signs. A government official arrived unexpectedly. He had the polite air of bureaucracy, the careful tone of someone who knew more than he revealed. "Miss Whitmore," he said formally, I am here regarding the estate records. Some discrepancies have been noticed in the property documentation. Eleanor observed him calmly. Her hands folded neatly before her. Her voice low and deliberate. Discrepancies, she asked. Please show me the details. The official hesitated. Then placed a sheaf of papers on the desk. Eleanor glanced at them. They were minor. Trivial, really. But enough to ignite curiosity in anyone who did not know the house's full history. She smiled faintly. The test of control. Eleanor had learned that power was not about the absence of threats. It was about controlling how threats perceived you. She asked the official a few questions. His answers were cautious. Measured. Every hesitation noted, every glance recorded. By the time he left the room, he believed he had discovered something significant. But he had not. He had been guided. Manipulated. Subtly. The house remained safe. The girl-turned-matriarch remained unseen in her true power. The servant's loyalty. In the days that followed, Eleanor tested the loyalty of the staff. Small tasks first. Minor responsibilities. She watched closely. She observed hesitation. Not defiance, hesitation. A young maid, Anna, had been at the estate for 5 years. She had served the previous master with obedience and fear. Eleanor assigned her the task of cleaning the east corridor. The corridor leading to the locked room. Anna hesitated. Her hands shook slightly. The house seemed to exhale around her. Eleanor did not speak. She simply watched. And Anna, without realizing it, obeyed fully. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood. The letters arrive. Not all attention came from officials or servants. Letters began arriving. Anonymous, typed, unsigned. Warnings. Hints. Messages meant to probe the family's secrets. Eleanor read each one carefully. Her fingers tracing the words as though they were lines of a map. Some letters were old. Some freshly composed. All carried a subtle threat. All questioned the estate's silence. She smiled again. Some challenges were not meant to be faced with brute force. Some were meant to be handled with patience. And Eleanor had patience. More than anyone could imagine. The night of suspicion. One evening, under the muted light of a full moon, Eleanor noticed something unusual. A figure moving at the edge of the property. Slow. Careful. Watching. The estate had eyes everywhere. She had trained them well. But this one had evaded the usual detection. Her heart did not race. Her hands did not shake. She simply observed. Isaac appeared silently beside her. "You've noticed," he said. "Good. That is the first step in controlling what might control you." Eleanor nodded. "We will see who dares step further." The intruder. The next night, the figure returned. Closer this time. Eleanor prepared quietly. The house responded. The walls seemed to whisper. The floorboards under her feet were silent. Her voice carried the authority she had honed over years. When the intruder reached the outer garden gates, Eleanor stepped forward. "Who goes there?" she called. Her voice calm, low, and commanding. The figure froze. Then slowly stepped into the moonlight. A young man, no older than 25. His eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Miss Whitmore," he said, voice trembling, I just wanted to know the truth." Eleanor studied him carefully. Every twitch, every glance, every breath measured. Curiosity is dangerous, she said softly. But it can also be instructive. The choice of mercy. Eleanor decided not to punish him. Not yet. Instead, she spoke to him. Softly, slowly. Revealing just enough to satisfy curiosity without giving the house away. Isaac observed silently. She had learned well. Manipulation without violence. Control without cruelty. The intruder left, terrified, yet oddly enlightened. Eleanor returned to the house. The walls seemed to hum approval. The estate had accepted her fully now. She was no longer a girl hiding in shadows. She was a matriarch commanding fear, respect, and obedience. The warning. But even power has limits. A single mistake can undo decades of planning. Letters, intruders, government interest, they were small cracks. But cracks could grow. Eleanor understood this. And she would be ready. No one would ever take the house from her. No one would ever take Isaac's guidance from her. And certainly, no one would ever make her powerless again. The dark legacy of the Whitmore estate was hers. And she intended to wield it carefully, patiently, and without mercy. The Whitmore estate had survived centuries. Now, under Eleanor, it would survive decades more. The outside world had begun to stir. Officials, intruders, and letters had all tested her patience. But Eleanor had learned the most important lesson of all: the house did not forgive mistakes. The house did not reward weakness. The house obeyed only strength and understanding. And Eleanor was both. The final intrusion. One stormy night, a group of outsiders arrived. They were officials, lawyers, and historians, curious, confident, and dangerously meticulous. They claimed to investigate anomalies in property records, labor contracts, and estate history. Eleanor watched from the shadowed balcony as they approached the gates. The rain fell in steady sheets, masking footsteps, but not her attention. Isaac appeared silently beside her. "They know more than before," he said. "They are clever. Do you trust yourself?" Eleanor nodded. "I trust the house," she said. "And it trusts me." The meeting. The visitors were led into the main hall. Eleanor greeted them politely. Her voice soft, deliberate, and commanding without raising it. They questioned her. They probed about records. About servants. About the house itself. She answered each question carefully. She revealed nothing essential. Yet she gave just enough detail to keep them satisfied. The officials exchanged uneasy glances. They felt something they could not explain. A weight in the air. A presence. A silent authority that pressed down on them. By the time they left, they believed they had accomplished something. They had not. The locked room revealed. The storm passed. Eleanor went to the locked room for the first time in months. She opened the door. Light spilled across the cold walls. Shadows of her past stretched across the floor. Scratches she had made as a child. Faint whispers of memory. The room was empty now. Not because she had been alone, but because everything she feared had been transformed into control. She smiled faintly. She had turned the prison of her youth into a throne. The chilling epilogue. Years later, the Whitmore estate was studied by historians. They wrote of Eleanor Whitmore as a matriarch, philanthropist, and protector of the land. They did not know the truth. They did not know of Isaac, or the locked room, or the decades of silence that had forged her. The servants who survived spoke only in whispers, always careful, always respectful. No outsider would ever fully comprehend the weight of the house. Of Eleanor's control. Of the power she wielded quietly, endlessly. And Eleanor herself, she never left the estate. She never allowed another to see the house fully. It remained a living entity, breathing under her command. The final lesson. Eleanor wrote in her journal, "Power is not taken by force. It is taken by patience, observation, and understanding. Fear may rule many, but knowledge rules all. And those who think the world can erase you do not understand what it truly means to survive." Her life, 25 years of hidden terror, had become her shield. Her mind, sharpened by solitude, had become her weapon. Her presence, quiet but undeniable, had become her empire. The last words. The Whitmore estate stood silent again. But the silence was different now. It was not oppressive. It was not fearful. It was acknowledgement. Eleanor Whitmore had survived the impossible. She had mastered the house. She had mastered herself. And the shadows of the past, the whispers of forgotten years, would never be able to touch her again. The house, the girl, the matriarch, they were one. And together, they would endure forever.